every day, the news tells us about people moving to Florida. And why wouldn't they move to Florida? We have miles of beaches. We have mild winters. And we have no state income tax. I mean, what's not to love? Well, in this video, we're going to look at the U.S. Census Bureau's data, and we're going to see when people leave Florida, where do they go? We're going to talk about the top 5 states that people from Florida move to. Okay, so people from up north, let's say like the Washington, D.C. area, Richmond, Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, they have been moving to Florida ever since I can remember. I'm lucky enough to call Florida, to be a native Floridian, to call Florida my home state. In that entire time, I remember, even as a child, I remember people moving here from other places. So it's not a new phenomenon. But 2 things did change during the COVID-induced real estate market. For one, people moved here in mass exodus. Before COVID, you have people who, when they retire, job transfers, they're in the Navy or something. Okay, but it wasn't the norm. The normal people who came here was the retirees. And I think everybody knows that. But during COVID, what changed was, one of the things that changed is we were getting people in droves. And they weren't all retirees. Many of them were younger, still working age, but they could work remotely. Now that nobody was going into the office, why not move from New York City to Jacksonville, Florida, for instance? And most of the employers were okay with it because their state taxes went way down by having their employees in Florida as opposed to New York. So it was a way to get that benefit of that tax break without necessarily picking up your office and moving it down. So it worked for everybody. The other thing that we saw a lot of for the first time was people moving to Florida from the West Coast. Typically, people from California would move to Idaho, they move to Texas, they move to places like that are kind of West Coast states. They don't really move to East Coast states unless their employment moves them and they don't really have a choice, like if you're in the military or something. But that was the norm. Now there's exceptions. Obviously, every time you have a rule, somebody does something different. But that's just the way it was. Well, during COVID, that changed too. For all of a sudden, we had people coming from Oregon. We had people coming from California. And by the way, we still do. I got 2 calls this week, actually, from couples in Oregon. Or from families in Oregon. So yeah, so that's not unusual anymore, but that didn't used to be the case pre-COVID. At least if it was, I never saw it. Okay, so now before we get into those 5 states, there's a term I want you to learn, and that's called a halfback. What is a halfback? Well, a halfback, and it's funny, I first heard this term as a teenager. I was visiting a friend of mine in Tennessee, and she told me what it was. And basically, so it's not new. I'm not in my 20s, if you were wondering. But what a halfback is somebody who comes from New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, D.C., one of those places, moves to Florida, but then decides to themselves, well, wait a minute, I only go to the beach so often, and I like a little bit of winter. I'd like a little bit of some change of scenery, some stuff that we're not getting where they live in Florida. So they go halfback. They go up to North Carolina or Tennessee. And I've seen several of my own buyers do this, actually. So the term halfback has been around forever. And it stands for people who come from northern states, move to Florida, and then have second thoughts and go half back to the middle of the country, which is Tennessee or North Carolina. So what should you take from all that? If you are considering moving here from a northern state, you might want to check out Tennessee and North Carolina. Why? Well, if enough people from northern states move to Florida and then go back, halfway back to Tennessee and North Carolina, if it's so many that there's a term for it, then there might be some validity to that, and you might want to check the middle of the country out too, while you're checking out the Jacksonville, Florida area. Okay, so there we go. With all that out of the way, as promised, let's jump into the top 5 states that people from Florida move to. Number 1 is Georgia. That's right. Georgia is only 1 state north. In fact, it's about 45 minutes, actually no, about an hour, hour and 15 minutes from my house to get to the Georgia state line. So it's not a far drive. But residents of Georgia do get to enjoy a few things that we Floridians don't enjoy. Number 1, they have mountains. There are many Floridians, especially North Floridians where we live in Northeast Florida, who go to Blue Ridge, Georgia or Helen, Georgia, for winter break or vacation, that sort of thing. Why? Well, they have mountains, which we do not have. They also have a little bit of snow. Now, it's not like Montana or Wisconsin snow by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a little bit of snow. So if you want to see a little bit of a winter, Georgia is a great place to go. Also, something residents of Georgia enjoy that Floridians do not is state income taxes. That's right. Georgia will actually tax your income on the state level where we here in Florida do not. So that's another thing that you get to enjoy by moving to Georgia. Number 2 is Texas. So this surprises me, and it doesn't. So here's why it doesn't surprise me. My entire life living here in Florida, I have known, even when I was younger, like in middle school and high school, I've known several families that have moved here from Texas. And I don't mean families who, they may have been in Texas because you were in the Army for 3 years or something, but you're not a real Texan. I'm talking about people who are born and raised in Texas, their parents were born and raised in Texas, and probably their parents were born and raised in Texas. Texans are one of the few states where they take immense pride in their state. And so it's not uncommon to have them move here and then move right back. So that doesn't surprise me at all. But if you know anyone, or you yourself have moved to Texas from Florida, I'd be curious to hear why. Go ahead and throw a comment down below. And I honestly am curious to know. So if you know anyone, again, who moved to Texas from Florida, throw it in down below. Number 3, okay, North Carolina. This does not surprise me at all for the reason that I just laid out. It is very common for people to come here from up north, live in Florida for a few years, and then decide, they kind of want to go halfway back to home for whatever the reason. So North Carolina is the number 3 state, doesn't surprise me at all. Something else that I've seen is I have seen a number of Floridians move to North Carolina. Some in particular that I can think of just did not enjoy the political climate in Florida, and so they moved to North Carolina. That's what they wanted to do, so that's what we did. But in any case, so North Carolina is the number 3 state that Floridians move to. Number 4, this probably isn't much, I don't know if it's a surprise or not, California. Now, I don't know, I can think of a few reasons for this. Number 1, I've been to California. Now, granted, it was when I was in the Marines, and so I was serving our country. But California is very different than Florida. In theory, they both have mild climates, mild climates, but the political climate's very different. The lifestyle's very different. I can't really imagine it being any more polar opposites. So it doesn't really surprise me that some people might move to Florida from California, get here, get into the life, and say, no, thank you. The other thing that I would think, although I don't know, would factor into this, is California has several large military bases. It's a strategic hub for this country, being given its location on the Mexican border and on the Pacific Ocean. At the same time, Florida is also a strategic hub for this country. There are several bases, military bases and naval bases here in the state of Florida. In fact, in Jacksonville alone, we have NAS Jax, which is Naval Air Station Jacksonville. We have Mayport, which is actually kind of cool to drive by because you get to see the ships and such, but that's a large ship base. We also have a Coast Guard base, the Marine Corps has an installation, the Army National Guard has something not too far away. So there's a lot of military presence here too in Florida, so it wouldn't surprise me if some of that is people relocating because they have active military orders. Okay, so before we move on to number 5, I have an ask. Are you enjoying this video? Are you considering moving to the Jacksonville, Florida area, meaning Northeast Florida? Well, if you are, every day my team and I help people relocating just like you. They call day, nights, weekends, and we absolutely love it. Give us a call, shoot us a text. My team is standing by to help make that transition a smooth one. Okay, so what is the number 5 state that Floridians move to? This does not surprise me at all either, and I can think of 2 good reasons. That state is Tennessee. So people move from Florida to Tennessee, in my experience, for 2 different reasons. Number 1, again, they came down from up north, decided they wanted some snow, they wanted a little bit of change of seasons, so they went back halfway back home to the middle part of the country, which is Tennessee. Also, both Tennessee and Florida do not have state income taxes, and there's a lot of similarities between the 2 states politically too, so this doesn't surprise me either. Another group of people who move to Tennessee in droves is native Floridians, people like myself. And why would we do that? Well, when you retire, typically, and again, I've been helping people with the real estate needs for over 10 years. Typically, when people retire, there's exceptions, but by and large, they go from a place that's more expensive to less expensive. So, because at that point, if they still have an income, it's not what it was when they were working full-time. And they don't want to get back in a trap where they have to work full-time when they don't want to. So when my daughter and I actually flew to Tennessee, now there's exceptions, like Nashville, Tennessee, for instance, is not less expensive than the rest of the state of Florida. But by and large, I think you can say, in general, the state of Tennessee is less expensive than most of Florida. And so when my daughter and I flew to Tennessee, to go pick up our puppy. We have a Hungarian Vizsla that we bought from a breeder, and the breeder actually had a farm in Tennessee. And so we went out there to go see her. You know, I'm a real estate agent when I travel. It's just what we do. I kind of looked around, and if I sold my house, took the equity that I have in it, in other words, the cash after paying off the mortgage, and I bought something in Tennessee, I could actually get a much nicer house on like an acre to 2 acres of land in that same area where we were. And that's why a lot of native Floridians do move to Tennessee. They retire, they sell their house here, you know, they bought their house for like 200 grand at this age group, and then they sell it for $1 million or something like that, and then they move to Tennessee and live like kings. So that's another reason why people move to Tennessee, and I'm not surprised at all to see Tennessee on the number 5 list. So we've talked about the top 5 states that Floridians move to. Well, where is it Floridians do not move to? Well, the U.S. Census Bureau has that answer for us too. And the answer is South Dakota. That's right. There are approximately 21 million residents in the great state of Florida. It's actually a little bit more than that now, but I'm going to keep it an even number. Do you know how many out of those 21 million of us actually picked up roots and moved to South Dakota? 300. Approximately 300 out of 21 million. So that is 0.00001429% of Floridians moved to South Dakota. So not a lot of us moving to the Rushmore state. I think that's what they call it. But anyway, so there you go. That is the top 5 states that Floridians move to, and the state that we do not move to. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, if there's anything I didn't address or thoughts, go ahead and throw it down below. I'd be curious. I'd love to respond to it. Also, if you need any help with relocating to Northeast Florida, my team and I would absolutely love to help you. Give us a call, shoot us a text, whatever works best for you. Thank you very much. My name is Andrew Michael, and I appreciate your time.